The planet was nothing like Earth. The sky was a strange shade of purple, and towering alien structures stretched into the clouds. The protagonist, a young explorer named Alex, had landed on this mysterious world after receiving a distress signal from an unknown source. His mission was simple: investigate and report back. But nothing about this planet seemed simple. Alex wandered through the alien marketplace, his eyes wide with curiosity. Strange creatures from every corner of the galaxy passed by, some with shimmering skin, others with multiple eyes. He could hear the chatter in alien languages, but no one paid him much attention. He was just another traveler passing through. His mind was focused on the task at hand, but something about the place made him uneasy. The air felt thick, almost electric, and there was a sense that something was watching him. He shook off the feeling, telling himself it was just the unfamiliar surroundings playing tricks on him. Then he saw her. Among the crowd stood a woman who, despite her alien appearance, exuded an aura of power that made everyone around her step back. She was tall, with striking violet eyes that seemed to glow with an inner fire. Her skin was a deep shade of blue, and her armor was unlike anything Alex had ever seen. Sleek, almost futuristic, and covered in intricate symbols that pulsed faintly. She stood there, a commanding presence in the middle of the market. Without warning, their eyes met. For a split second, Alex froze. The world around him seemed to vanish. The chatter of the market, the movement of the crowd, it all disappeared. His gaze was locked with hers, and the intensity of it made his heart race. There was something in her eyes, something deep and ancient, that sent a chill down his spine. The alien princess, for that's who she was, stepped forward. The crowd seemed to part for her, as if they knew not to get in her way. Alex, unable to move, felt a strange pull, as though he was being drawn toward her against his will. She stopped in front of him, her gaze never wavering. For a moment, everything was silent. The tension was thick, like something important was about to happen. And then she spoke. Her voice was smooth, but there was an edge to it, commanding, yet strangely calm. You are not from here," she said. Alex's heart raced, and before he could respond, he realized that his fate was no longer his own. Alex stood frozen, the princess's gaze still locked onto his, as if she could see straight through him. Her eyes were intense, glowing faintly in the dim light of the market. His heart raced, and despite his training, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was completely powerless in her presence. The crowd around them had fallen completely silent. It felt as though the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for what would happen next. Alex swallowed hard, trying to find his voice. I'm just a traveler," he stammered, his words sounding weak even to himself. "I'm here too." But before he could finish, the princess raised a hand, silencing him. The air seemed to shift, the atmosphere growing heavier as if the very space around them was bending to her will. "You are not just a traveler, human," she said, her voice smooth but cold, like the sound of ice cracking. "You have been drawn here for a reason. You have no choice in the matter now." Alex felt a sudden rush of confusion. He had no idea what she was talking about. Why was she acting like this? He was only here on a simple mission, to investigate the distress signal. Yet, as she spoke, something inside him began to shift. There was an undeniable force in her words, as if she could see something in him that he couldn't see in himself. "Come with me," she ordered, and with a simple gesture, she turned and began walking toward the palace in the distance. Her guards, towering and armored, followed her without question, parting the crowd like a wave. Alex didn't know why, but he found himself following. It wasn't that he wanted to. It was like an invisible string was pulling him forward, drawing him toward her and away from everything else. As they walked, the crowd parted, their eyes watching Alex with a mix of fear and awe. Whispers filled the air, alien languages he didn't understand. But the tone was unmistakable, reverence, and perhaps even fear. When they reached the entrance of the palace, The princess turned to face him again, her expression unreadable. "You are in my domain now," she said, her voice cold, yet there was a hint of something else in it, something that almost felt like curiosity. Alex felt a knot form in his stomach. "What do you want with me?" he asked, his voice stronger now, but still uncertain. The princess studied him for a long moment, her violet eyes piercing into his soul. "You will learn soon enough. For now, you are mine." The words hung in the air like a sentence, and Alex felt the weight of them settle on his chest. He was trapped, and there was no turning back now. His fate, for better or worse, was bound to hers. Alex's mind raced as the princess led him deeper into the palace. The massive stone walls were adorned with strange, glowing symbols, and the air was thick with an otherworldly energy. Every step he took felt heavier, as if something invisible was pressing down on him, urging him to stay silent and obedient. The guards followed behind, their eyes cold and watchful. Alex felt a knot in his stomach. He had been trained for dangerous situations, but this felt different. This was not just a foreign world. It was a place of power, a place where the rules of reality seemed to bend. They reached a large chamber at the heart of the palace, where the princess stopped and turned to face him. The room was dimly lit, with glowing crystals embedded in the walls casting an eerie light. In the center stood a raised platform, surrounded by dark, ancient markings. "You felt it, haven't you?" the princess asked, her voice smooth but filled with an intensity that made Alex shiver. "The pull, the bond that has already begun to form between us." Alex opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. It was true. Since the moment their eyes had locked, he'd felt something, a strange sensation, like an invisible thread tying him to her. He didn't understand it, and it terrified him. "You are not the first to experience this," she continued, her gaze never leaving his. "I've seen it before. A connection so powerful, so undeniable, that it cannot be broken." Alex shook his head. "I don't want to be bound to you. I'm not here for this. I'm just a traveler." She interrupted, her voice cutting through his words like a blade. "No, you are more than that now. Whether you accept it or not, your fate is sealed. You are already a part of me." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Every instinct told him to run, but his legs felt like lead, rooted to the ground, as if something deep inside him refused to move. The princess stepped closer, her presence overwhelming. "You might resist for now, but it won't matter. The bond is growing stronger, and soon you will not be able to imagine life without it." Alex's heart raced as panic set in. What did she mean? How could this be happening? He was just a human, a mere visitor on this strange world. How had he become so tangled in the web of this alien princess's power? "I'll never accept this," he said through clenched teeth, his voice trembling with anger and fear. Zorethra, his captor, his fate, smiled slightly, a cold, knowing smile. "You'll see, human. You'll see that it's not a matter of acceptance. It's a matter of survival." The words echoed in his mind as the invisible bond between them tightened. There was no escape now. His life, his choices, all of it was beginning to slip through his fingers. Whether he liked it or not, his fate was now intertwined with hers. And deep down, Alex knew that there was no turning back. Days passed, and the feeling of being bound to Princess Zorethra grew stronger with each passing hour. Alex had never felt so trapped. Her presence lingered in the air around him like a constant pressure, forcing him to feel every command, every decision that was made. Despite his desire to break free, his body and mind were slowly surrendering to her power. There was no denying it anymore. He was bound to her in ways that went beyond the physical. Zorethra kept him close, always watching him with those violet eyes that held an unsettling intensity. At first, Alex had thought she was just trying to control him, trying to bend him to her will with brute force. But as the days wore on, he began to realize that there was more to this than mere control. There was something deeper, something far darker at play. One evening, after another exhausting day of being tested and pushed to his limits, Zorathra summoned Alex to her private chamber. The walls of the room were adorned with strange, ancient artifacts, and the air smelled of incense and something metallic, something that hinted at a long-forgotten power. It felt as if the room itself was alive with the echoes of centuries-old secrets. Alex stepped into the room, feeling the pull in his chest, his legs moving forward despite his resistance. Zorathra was standing by a large stone table, her back turned as she examined some glowing crystal. "You're wondering why this is happening to you," she said, her voice soft, but there was an edge to it that made Alex feel uneasy. She turned to face him, her eyes sharp with knowledge, as if she had seen into his very soul. "I don't know what's happening," Alex admitted, his voice raw. "I never signed up for this. I didn't come here to be your prisoner." Zorathra gave him a look that could freeze the blood in anyone's veins. "You think this is imprisonment?" she asked, almost amused. "You don't understand, do you? This bond between us. It's not something I did to you, Alex. It's something that was destined to happen." The word hung in the air like a heavy weight, and Alex's confusion deepened. "What do you mean? How could we be destined?" She walked toward him slowly, her every movement graceful and deliberate, like a predator closing in on its prey. "I am the last of my kind, Alex. My people, the Zorathians, once ruled this galaxy, but there is a curse that runs through my blood. The power that courses through me, the power that binds you to me. It was meant to be used to unite worlds, to create a new empire. But the truth is, no one can bear that burden alone." Alex's heart pounded in his chest. "What are you saying?" Zorathra's expression softened slightly, but there was still a coldness in her eyes. "The moment we locked eyes, the bond between us was forged. It was never a choice, not for me and not for you. You are the key, Alex, the key to breaking my curse." Alex's mind spun. A curse? What did she mean by that? Was this some kind of twisted fate that neither of them had control over? "I searched for years, for centuries even," she continued, "for someone who could help me break free from this curse. But no one has ever lasted long enough to even understand the truth. You, however, you might be different. You might be the one who can help me." A shiver ran down Alex's spine. "So I'm not just a prisoner, am I? You need me." Zorathra nodded. "I do. But it's not as simple as you think. If we don't find a way to break the curse, I will destroy everything around me. My kingdom, the worlds I rule. It's inevitable. And you, Alex, are the only one who can stop it." Alex stood frozen, the weight of her words sinking into him. He was trapped, yes, but there was something more. Responsibility, a fate that had been forced upon him. He had no choice but to help her, but the cost would be far greater than he could ever imagine. The truth was darker than he could have ever believed. And now, Alex understood that the real battle was just beginning. The following days blurred together in a haze of unease. Alex had tried to resist the pull, the invisible chain that bound him to Zorathra, but it was futile. The more he fought it, the stronger the connection became. There was no escaping her presence now. He was trapped. Whether by his own will or by the strange fate that had brought him here, it didn't matter. Zorathra was relentless. She had begun to take him through her world's ancient rituals, hoping to unlock something hidden deep within him, something that could break the curse she had spoken of. The more time he spent with her, the more he realized the depth of her power and how much of it was linked to him now. It was like a constant hum beneath his skin, a sensation that thrummed through his veins and made it impossible to ignore. But Alex had to admit, he was starting to understand her better. She wasn't just a cold, powerful ruler. There was a vulnerability beneath the surface, a desperation that clung to her like a shadow. She hadn't chosen this fate, just as he hadn't. The curse she spoke of wasn't something she could control. It was a punishment, a tragic legacy of her people that had bound her to a destiny of loneliness and torment. Zorathra had taken him to the royal archives one evening, a vast library filled with ancient texts and relics. She had pulled a dusty scroll from a shelf and laid it on the table between them, its symbols glowing faintly in the dim light of the room. "These are the words of my ancestors," Zorathra said quietly, her voice softer than usual. "They were the ones who cursed me. They believed that only the strongest of bonds could save me, but I was never supposed to find someone to bear it with me." Alex leaned over the scroll, studying the cryptic writing. It was in a language he didn't recognize, but something in his gut told him it wasn't like any other language he had encountered. There was a power to it, a resonance that seemed to echo in his bones. "You were always meant to rule alone?" Alex asked, his voice betraying a mix of curiosity and sympathy. Zorathra nodded, her eyes darkening with the weight of the past. "Yes, the Zorathian royal bloodline was cursed by the gods long ago. The curse was meant to ensure that no ruler could ever share power with another, especially not someone who could truly understand them. I was meant to be a queen who ruled in solitude, never finding a match, never finding a partner strong enough to stand beside me." The words settled in the air between them like a heavy fog, and Alex felt his heart tug with the realization of how tragic her existence had been. He had come to this world with no idea of the weight she carried. "And the bond between us?" he asked, almost afraid of the answer. "It is the key," she said simply, her gaze unwavering. "Our connection is a result of the curse, two souls bound to one another, whether we like it or not. The only way for me to be free is to find someone who can bear this weight with me, someone who can stand by my side, not as a ruler and a subject, but as equals." Alex's mind spun. The more he heard, the more impossible it seemed. Could he really be the one to help her? Could he live the rest of his life with this strange, mystical bond, one that was as much a part of him as his own heartbeat? Zorathra's gaze softened, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "You've already been drawn into this, Alex, whether you want to or not. But there's more to this bond than just power. There's a choice. You must decide whether you will help me break the curse or let it consume us both." The weight of her words crashed down on him like a tidal wave. This was no longer just about survival. It was about making a decision, one that would change everything. Alex took a deep breath, looking into her eyes for the first time without fear, without resistance. There was something in her, something human, something that made him believe that maybe, just maybe, they could survive this together. But the bond was growing stronger, pulling him deeper into her world. And the more he fought it, the more inevitable it seemed. The question now wasn't if he could escape the bond. It was whether he could accept it. And if he did, would it destroy them both, or could they conquer it together? Alex's mind was in turmoil as the days dragged on. He could feel the connection between himself and Zorathra growing stronger, tugging at the very core of his being. It was like an unbreakable thread, linking his thoughts, his actions, even his emotions to hers. The bond was no longer something he could ignore or resist. It was a part of him now, woven into the fabric of his existence. Zorathra, too, seemed to sense this. She had stopped being the cold, distant queen he had first encountered. Instead, she had become something else, vulnerable, almost desperate at times, her every word laced with a mix of hope and fear. It was clear that she was struggling with the same emotions, caught between her desire for freedom and the weight of her responsibility as ruler. One evening, as they stood on the palace balcony overlooking the darkened landscape, Zorathra spoke in a voice tinged with sorrow. "This curse is my inheritance," she said, staring out into the distance. "It's been passed down through generations of my bloodline, a punishment for the sins of my ancestors. I was never meant to find peace. I was meant to carry this burden alone, until the end of time." Alex stood next to her, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. Despite everything, he couldn't help but feel sympathy for her. No one should have to bear such a fate, not even someone as powerful as her. The curse had taken away her chance at a normal life, at love, at companionship. There has to be another way, Alex said quietly, though he wasn't sure what he meant by it. We can't just accept this fate, can we? Zorathra's eyes softened, and for the briefest moment, the coldness that had always been present in her gaze melted away. She looked at him, really looked at him, as if seeing him for the first time. I've tried everything, she whispered, her voice breaking. I searched the galaxy, studied every ancient text, consulted the wisest of my people, but nothing worked. No one was ever strong enough, or willing enough, to help me. I thought I was doomed to rule alone forever. Alex felt the pull of her words, the depth of her despair. He knew that if they were to have any chance at breaking the curse, they would have to face it together. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about freeing both of them from the chains that had bound them, and maybe, just maybe, finding a way to turn this curse into something more. But there was something else Alex had realized. The bond between them wasn't just about power or destiny. There was something else, a growing connection, a pull toward her that he could no longer deny. Despite everything, he was beginning to care for her in a way that went beyond just being her captive. He took a deep breath, turning to face her fully. I'll help you, he said firmly, but we need to figure this out together. No more secrets, no more lies. We need to trust each other completely. Zorathra studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, finally, she nodded. You've made the right choice, she said softly. But there is still much you don't understand. The curse isn't just a bond between us. It's a part of me, woven into my very being. If we're to break it, we must go to the heart of the curse itself. Alex felt his heart race. Where is the heart of the curse? What do we need to do? Zorathra turned away, her eyes filled with determination. There is an ancient temple hidden deep within the mountains of Zorathra's home planet. It's said that the temple holds the key to the curse, the source of the power that binds us. If we can reach it and unlock its secrets, we might be able to free both of us. The urgency in her voice was undeniable, but so was the fear. Alex could see the weight of what they were about to do, the risk they were taking. It was a journey that could either lead to their salvation or their destruction. Without another word, Zorathra began to lead him out of the balcony and toward the palace's inner chambers. The time for hesitation was over. We leave at dawn, she said. Prepare yourself, Alex. The journey will be dangerous, and we cannot afford to fail. Alex nodded, a mixture of fear and determination building inside him. He had no idea what lay ahead, but he knew that this was their only chance. They would either break the curse together or be consumed by it. As they walked through the palace corridors, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. They were no longer just a ruler and her captive. Something deeper had begun to form between them. Whether it was love, trust, or something more complex, Alex wasn't sure. But he knew that whatever happened, he wasn't going to let her face this alone. And as they prepared to journey into the heart of the curse, Alex could only hope that their bond would be strong enough to survive whatever awaited them. The dawn came quickly, the first light of the sun spilling over the horizon like a warning. Alex stood by the palace gates, his heart racing as the enormity of what they were about to do hit him. The air around him was thick with tension, every step he took feeling like a step closer to an unknown fate. Zorathra stood beside him, her regal composure intact despite the darkness that lingered in her eyes. She had never looked more like the powerful queen she was, and yet, for the first time, Alex could see the weight of her burden. The curse, the endless loneliness, it had defined her life for so long, and now it was something they both had to face. I know you're scared, Zorathra said, her voice soft but carrying a weight of its own. But remember, the bond between us is stronger than anything. It will guide us. We're in this together. Alex swallowed hard, nodding. He had no choice now. The bond was undeniable. He could feel it, a constant hum deep within him. And whether he wanted to admit it or not, A part of him had come to rely on it. It was the only thing that kept him from being swallowed by the fear. They were not alone. A small, elite team of Zorathra's trusted warriors accompanied them, preparing to journey into the mountains where the temple stood hidden. The warriors, though loyal, were wary of the mission. It was said that no one had ever returned from the temple. Those who tried had been swallowed by the very power the temple held. But Zorathra had insisted that they come. There was no time to waste. As the group ventured through the rocky, barren landscape, Alex's nerves only grew sharper. The terrain was unforgiving, and the ancient temple lay far off in the depths of the mountain range. They had to navigate through craggy cliffs and narrow paths, and the further they went, the darker the air seemed to grow. It was as if they were walking into the heart of a storm, one that threatened to swallow them whole. Zorathra remained at the front, her gaze never leaving the path ahead. She was determined, but Alex could see the flickers of fear in her eyes. The closer they got to the temple, the stronger the pull of the bond became. It was as if the very land around them was alive, humming with power. The curse was drawing them in, leading them to the one place that could either destroy them or break their chains. After what felt like an eternity, they finally arrived at the foot of the mountain where the temple was said to reside. The entrance was hidden behind thick vines and jagged rocks, nearly impossible to spot. Yet, as if drawn by some unseen force, Zorathra walked straight to it. The heart of the curse, she whispered, her voice barely audible. It's here, Alex. The power that has kept me in this prison. It's all tied to this place. Alex's heart thudded in his chest as he followed her into the dark, foreboding temple. The air inside was thick with a strange, ancient energy. It felt like the walls were closing in on them, the very stones vibrating with an otherworldly hum. There were no torches, no signs of life, only the sound of their footsteps echoing through the empty halls. The temple was vast, its chambers stretching endlessly in every direction. It was a place of overwhelming silence, the kind that felt like it could swallow you whole if you weren't careful. And yet, in the center of the grand hall stood a single pedestal, glowing with an eerie, pulsating light. The source of the curse. Zorathra stopped in front of it, her eyes filled with a mixture of dread and anticipation. She turned to Alex, her face drawn tight with determination. "This is it," she said, her voice trembling. "If we don't succeed, we will be bound to this curse forever. The power here will consume us. Alex, are you ready?" Alex looked into her eyes, and for the first time since this strange journey began, he wasn't afraid. The bond between them, which had once seemed like a curse, now felt like a part of him he couldn't imagine living without. Whatever happened here, whatever they faced, he would face it with her, together. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions crashing through him. Zorathra stepped forward, her hand hovering over the pedestal. The light from the pedestal flickered and intensified, swirling around them like a storm. "Brace yourself," she whispered. "This will test everything we are." Before Alex could respond, a burst of energy erupted from the pedestal, filling the entire chamber with blinding light. His body felt like it was being pulled apart, the bond between him and Zorathra strengthening and warping, stretching until it felt like it would snap. The very air around them crackled with the power of the curse, and Alex could feel it coursing through him, pulling at every fiber of his being. It was as if time stood still. And then, in a flash, the world went silent. The light vanished, and the power that had bound them for so long dissipated. Alex blinked, his vision clearing. For a moment, he thought he had lost consciousness, but when his eyes focused, he saw Zorathra standing before him. The oppressive weight that had been on both of them was gone. She looked at him, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "We did it," she whispered. But the victory was bittersweet. The curse had been broken, yes, but the power that had once held them together now left them standing on the edge of an uncertain future. Alex's heart raced as he realized that even without the curse, their bond was still there, stronger than ever. They were free, But what would that freedom mean for them now? The future remained uncertain, but one thing was clear. Their journey together had just begun.